Asada Brown,
Here.
Monica Dillenberg,
Here.
Cicely Harris, Bob Mueller, Jeremy
Bob is
Peichel.
here.
Oh, excuse me. Okay. Bob Mueller is here. Jeremy Peichel,
I'm here.
Anthony Taylor, Kina Yang,
Here.
and Tony Yaruso.
Here.
Thank you.
Bob, should we just double check your audio here?
Can you hear me now?
Yes, good.
I'm back.
Okay. So then with that, we'll move on to approval of our agenda. We do have a proposal to insert something small, and we're debating what the right way to do this is. I think what I'm going to propose is an amendment to our business section, although it's a little weird. Just to stick in this little icebreaker thing that Linnea, our council liaison, had suggested, and that Emmett had sent out, which won't actually be something we vote on, but it's just sort of going to be a standing old business at this point. So I would move that amendment as a motion.
Second.
Second for Bob, thank you. Is there any discussion on that? Okay, and hearing none, since we actually have an amendment on that, we'll have you do a roll call on that as well, Michelle.
Thank you, Chair Yaruso. Asada Brown,
Aye.
Monica Dillenberg,
Aye.
Cicely Harris,
Aye.
Bob Mueller,
Aye.
Jeremy Peichel,
Aye.
Anthony Taylor, Kina Yang,
Aye.
Tony Yaruso.
Aye.
Thank you.
All right, so our agenda is approved as amended. Thank you. That will bring us then to approval of minutes from our April 1st meeting. Give you a second to read those, and then we'll take a motion from anyone who was present for that meeting.
Tony, I have a correction. This is Cecily.
Can you move them first and then add your correction in discussion? Just as a procedural bit.
So I'll move approval.
Okay, I'm not sure I caught who said those things. Did you, Michelle?
Excuse me, I just heard, I believe if you could repeat that, that'd be great.
I think it was Jeremy and Bob both moved.
Thank you.
Okay, so we'll put one of those as a motion and one as the second. Okay, that brings us then to discussion and corrections of those. Cecily, if you could go ahead there.
Yeah, in my commissioner report, I was mentioning an upcoming Washington County Cottage Grove Regional Park ribbon cutting, and that will take place on June 8th. I have not attended it yet.
Okay. That was, oh yeah, it said past tense attended, to saying, letting an informational thing for other people that there will be one on June 8th. That was for the Washington County Cottage Grove Regional Park. Okay, thank you, Cecily. Any other corrections to those minutes? Okay, hearing none, we'll proceed then with a vote on those minutes as corrected. Go ahead, Michelle.
Thank you, Chair. Asada Brown,
Aye.
Monica Dillenberg,
Aye.
Cicely Harris,
Aye.
Bob Mueller,
Aye.
Jeremy Peichel,
Aye.
Anthony Taylor, Kana Young, Kana
Aye.
Yang,
Aye.
Tony Yaruso.
Aye.
Thank you.
All right, so our minutes are approved as corrected. That brings us to the public invitation portion of our meeting. Because of COVID stuff, we're taking those by email to me prior to the meeting as listed on our agenda. I have not received any this month. The last comments I got were regarding the item that was a business item for us last month. So I don't have any public invitation comments right now. So that brings us then to our added agenda item. This was just a suggestion to kind of keep equity things in mind. We sometimes have big presentations and discussions about equity things when we're talking about policy changes and the like. But also, Councilmember Atlas Ingerbretson wanted to help us with ways to keep it in our thoughts on kind of the back burner as we look at everything else. So just a sentence or two, if you think of anything of this month, we're thinking, how have some of the events of the last month impacted your thinking about equity and the regional park system? Things that have been in the news, and how might that relate to our work? So if anyone would like to start us off, go ahead, Linnea.
Maybe just since this was part of my doing, I like to call them equity nudges. I like having them at regular times in meetings to help provide opportunities as people come across things to share them and provide a short little space time to do it. And I think it also helps to remind us of our goals in outside of formal conversations, and ways to keep them on board. So in the spirit of that, I would just share how important in the events of the last month, particularly around the Chauvin trial and Dante Wright, how important parks have been. A number of groups had hosted healing times in regional parks for people who were experiencing the trauma of both things happening, with prayer, with cultural activities, and just being present with one another. So I think of that's something that's definitely a new thing. I don't remember ever really seeing that in the past. It's both an articulation of how important it is to address trauma, but also that the parks have been seen as a place where people can do some of that healing has been really exciting to see, and is a way where parks can really are very important, and can be more important if we leverage and make sure we're thinking about all those ways that people need to have respite and healing from the types of trauma that they experience.
Thank you, Linnea. Say also, in addition to what people are kind of gravitating towards parks for, it's also something to be mindful of what we're using our parks for consciously, and how we're hosting things, and how our park implementing agency partners are doing things as well. We have, both, in addition to the kind of impromptu gatherings for healing, parks are also a common venue that can be used for freedom of speech purposes, whether it's, protests or raising awareness and that kind of thing, with certain limitations. And I know we had at least one of our implementing agencies have some discussions about whether their office space and parking lots should be used in certain ways by other agencies. And so what's the impact of who we're inviting in, and also how do we deal with people that have a right to be in park space for certain things? We'll have to keep that in mind in addition to their recreational purposes. Sure.
I was thinking, this is Bob. I was thinking about the sense of Black Lives Matter or Black and Brown Lives Matter. And with the population growth continuing to move to increase their proportion of our population. Their lives certainly matter, and they should matter to us as we make more room for their interests and activities, which may be different than the average white person's interest. So it's just a consciousness of that we need to change with that growth, and their lives do matter, and so we should make sure we're taking that into consideration as we move our stuff. Pass.
Thank you, Bob.
This is Jeremy. I'd like to offer something.
Yes, Jeremy.
So my last month, I've been going through the equity proposals for our RFP that went out. And it's been really nice to see the different ways that implementing agencies have considered equity in their programming, or not programming sometimes. But their approaches, I think, are really interesting. And some of the key takeaways I saw was recognizing the need for human-centered, focused engagement at different levels, and the recognition of people having self-determination to define spaces for themselves. And I think it's really important, as Bob was saying, to recognize that other people may see spaces differently from the way that you do. And you don't want to try to impose your vision for a space on them. You want to allow them to experience it. And so bringing space to people is one of the themes that I saw that I thought was really interesting. And I thought that was important, especially considering the legislature is taking up a lot of changes. It might be worth having them take a look at some of the authorizing legislation related to parks and open space to consider how this determination could go forward and allow more flexibility in our authorization.
If
Thank you,
may
Jeremy.
I ask something? This is Monica Dillenburg.
Yes, go ahead.
You know, last year when everything happened, we was in Minneapolis, so it's like 20 minutes from my house. This time it was Brooklyn Center, which is 10 minutes from my house. My daughter's school got canceled the whole week because on civil unrest and then high levels of violence. My friend's daycare was closed because it happened right in front of the door, which we think, well, is nice that it was Sunday because it will be, you know, parents pick up time and you don't want anything of that. And the neighborhood was in shock that something like that happened because never happened. And then, you know, all the realtors start happening, and my niece turned 1 year old and she lives in Champlain right when they say that, you know, the police was from Champlain. So we have to stop her 1 year old birthday party short because the curfew came, and it was at, you know, 6:50 when we left the house in Champlain through Brooklyn Park, which is not too long. But it happens that my husband took the back road, so we crossed through Three Rivers Park, you know, the regional park. And as soon as you go into the park, it's just calm. Like there is nothing going on there. And then you can, for a second, you know, kind of take a break and breathe in. And then you have, you know, I think we saw an eagle on the lake, or you see birds going on. So I think it's important that we remember that when things are happening in our life and the cities are literally getting burned, our park is our sanctuary. It doesn't matter where you are or where you come from or how you use it. It's a space that we can go take a breath and then just relax for a second and then come back and, you know, deal with the stuff that is happening again. So I thought it was that's what I was, you know, going to the idea. Like I think the great is that we need to keep it open to everybody and make sure that they know that are welcome to be there for sure.
Yeah, thank you. Any other thoughts?
I'll just say thank you, Chair and team. I think, Emmett, I saw you writing a bunch during this time. What I've found by doing this practice is there's all kinds of ideas and things that can come up when it's kind of free. It's a free creative space for thinking about equity and layering it into the work and current events. And it can really create an opportunity for being present with one another and present in the work. I just want to thank everyone who shared and those who didn't for being a part of the conversation. I feel like this is just a really powerful moment. And so I just want to say thank you for being willing to step into it. And it feels nice to be in a meeting where you don't have to pretend everything in the world has been great, and to acknowledge the hard things that we're facing and share in the struggles and the aspirations and the hope. So I just want to say thank you.
All right. Thank you, Linnea, for the idea. All right. With that, we'll move on to our other business item, which is the Square Lake Special Recreation Feature Master Plan for Washington County. And we have Colin Kelly presenting. So you can go ahead with that, and slides for that from Greg.
Thanks, Greg. Good afternoon, Chair, Council Member, and Commissioners. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Yep.
Great. I am Colin Kelly, as was stated, Planning Analyst, and I'm here to present the Square Lake Special Recreation Feature Master Plan on behalf of Washington County. I should note that Connor Schaefer, Sandy Brewer, and Sharon Price, all with Washington County, are here today and may respond to questions at the end of this presentation as appropriate. Next slide, please. Square Lake is located in the northeast part of the regional park system in May Township in Washington County. It is approximately 8 miles north of Stillwater. The figures on the left and in the center are figures 1 and 2 in the staff report. At 25 acres, Square Lake provides several recreation opportunities, including scuba diving, swimming, fishing, lake access, picnicking, and hiking. The figure on the right is figure 3 in the staff report. Square Lake's designation as a special recreation feature stems from the pristine water of the lake itself and high-quality swimming opportunities provided. The lake has some of the clearest water in the Twin Cities region. The Square Lake Master Plan has been developed in collaboration with park users, project stakeholders, and the community to create a comprehensive, long-term vision for the park's future. The planning process sought to balance appropriate recreation opportunities and facilities with natural resource protection and management, with a special focus on maintaining the water quality of the lake. Next slide, please. A Technical Advisory Committee, or TAC, was created for interagency collaboration, review of existing conditions, and discussion of improvement opportunities at Square Lake. In addition to Washington County staff across multiple divisions, the TAC was comprised of representatives from the Minnesota Department of Natural Resources, or DNR, Metropolitan Council, Washington Conservation District, Washington County Park and Open Space Commission, Carnelian Marine St. Croix Watershed District, or CARMAR for short, May Township, Square Lake Homeowners Association, and Square Lake Film and Music Festival. Plan development was led by a project management team, or PMT, comprised of Washington County and consulting staff. The PMT met throughout the project and was responsible for managing development of the plan, reviewing existing conditions and public input, and identifying park improvements in line with the long-term vision for the special recreation feature. Engagement tools used during the planning process included a dedicated project website, the county newsletter, Staying in Touch, a pair of online engagement efforts, targeted stakeholder outreach with some of the folks I just referenced, like the DNR and CARMAR, and listening sessions and site visits with underserved populations. More on that in a minute. As a result of this outreach and engagement, the county compiled common public engagement outcomes, several of which are shown here on the right side. Some of those outcomes included protecting and enhancing water quality and clarity, improving non-motorized watercraft site amenities and programming, and better connecting upper and lower areas of the park. Next slide, please. Washington County conducted an examination of the public engagement process and outcomes for stakeholders by race, ethnicity, national origin, income, ability, age, and other pertinent characteristics. The county focused on engaging existing and potential park users within a 30-minute travel shed. Compared to the overall Washington County population, disparities in Washington County park and trail visitation included age, household income, educational attainment, and physical or mental ability. The plan also recognizes the impacts that past decisions have had on present-day inequitable outcomes experienced at Square Lake and throughout the regional park system. An example of this is the historic segregation of access to swimming and development of swimming skills by race and ethnicity. To reach a diverse cross-section of the community, the project team provided information to the public in a variety of ways, with an emphasis on trying to make it easy and accessible for people to participate in the planning process. It's worth mentioning that self-reported demographics gathered from the initial online survey demonstrated a need to supplement engagement strategies with additional outreach. An example that highlights this work is the listening sessions and site visits the project team conducted with representatives of underserved groups, including Latinx, park users, and people with different abilities. Feedback received during engagement events and listening sessions were synthesized with all the project findings into themes and goals that guided the plan. Specifically, 17 of the 23 plan recommendations directly address comments and input received by the underserved populations engaged. Those recommendations are listed on page 10 of the staff report. The targeted engagement led to a better and more inclusive master plan. Through this process, Washington County was able to create relationships and build trust with community stakeholders. Underserved groups were followed up with as the final draft plan was out for public comment. The county will continue to engage the community on the future implementation of the plan. Next slide, please. To further improve park resources and accommodate growing demand, 2 locations near Square Lake have been identified for potential acquisition. The figure on the right is figure 4 in the staff report. Through the master plan process, these sites were identified for their ability to address project goals and match the criteria for Square Lake's inclusion into the regional park system. This additional land will allow the county to better protect areas around the lake while providing opportunities for people to experience the outdoors. One site being considered for potential park expansion is the Golden Acres RV and picnic area, a roughly 9.5-acre site immediately south of the existing park space. Located on relatively flat terrain, this property currently operates as a campground and provides lake access to scuba divers, motorboats, and non-motorized watercraft enthusiasts. Acquisition would provide additional natural resource protections to the lake through conservation and restoration. The other site being considered is the 55-acre Wilder property on the northwest shore of the lake. This parcel is largely wooded and was previously used as a youth camp. Acquisition of this property would provide additional protection to areas draining to Square Lake. It would also introduce new features not feasible in the existing park space: a larger network of trails, programming space, and passive lake access. Next slide, please. Community and partner engagement signaled an interest in enhancing the park's infrastructure to address stormwater runoff while also enhancing the park's ecological qualities. A non-motorized watercraft launch and rental opportunities are proposed north of the existing boat launch. Other accommodations include improvements to the existing boat launch and new signage educating park users about aquatic invasive species. Additional features would include a small group picnic shelter by the fishing pier, improvements to the fishing pier to better accommodate people with different abilities and needs, and expanded shoreline fishing amenities. To better provide for visitors at the swimming beach and picnic areas, the plan calls for renovation and expansion of the beach building. The existing structure is well used, to say the least, and requires ongoing maintenance. Improved access is needed from parking lots to this facility. and the restrooms and shower facilities will be expanded and upgraded to meet or exceed Americans with Disability Act or ADA standards. A few improvements are targeted towards water quality and the view shed from the lake as well. This includes use of shoreline restoration and vegetation to mitigate the presence of paved surfaces and vehicles in the special recreation feature. Finally, additional trail development is needed to provide more accessible connections between park destinations and to provide more opportunities for hiking and snowshoeing. Public input supports designating a trail segment near the overflow parking lot as a fitness loop, which would consist of a path with outdoor exercise equipment or obstacles installed along its length. This was a popular request from the community and is an amenity not currently offered at other Washington County parks. Next slide, please. Square Lake is a special recreation feature because it provides access to some of the clearest waters in the metropolitan area. Therefore, protecting the water quality of Square Lake is critical. The special recreation feature is dominated by several wooded areas surrounding open areas that have been developed into lawns for use by park visitors. Upland areas of the park are dominated by mixed woodlands, planted pine stands, and an oak savanna. Field surveys noted additional needs and opportunities for oak savanna restoration, pine grove management, prairie restoration, shoreline vegetation restoration and protection, and invasive species control. An adaptive management approach is recommended for Square Lake to preserve and enhance the unique resources within the park and properties being considered for acquisition. Next slide, please. The plan estimates $1,760,804 in acquisition costs, $8,696,116 in development and infrastructure costs, $543,200 in natural resource management costs, and $2,711,434 in design, engineering, construction, and implementation contingencies. Altogether, the total estimated costs then are $13,711,554. I should note, as always, approval of the plan does not commit the council to any funding at this time. Further council action is required to authorize state and council funds for regional park implementing agencies. Next slide, please. The Square Lake Special Recreation Feature Master Plan is consistent with the requirements of the 2040 Regional Parks Policy Plan, particularly Planning Strategy 1, Master Plan requirements, as well as other council policies included in Thrive MSP 2040. Next slide, please. The proposed action before you then is that the Metropolitan Council approve Washington County's Square Lake Special Recreation Feature Master Plan. And with that, I will stand for any comments or questions you may have, and will remind you that Washington County staff is on hand as well. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Colin. What initial questions do commissioners have?
This is Jeremy. I have a question briefly.
Yeah, go ahead, Jeremy.
I noted the 30-minute travel shed for Square Lake, and I want to know if that was restricted to 30 minutes within Washington County, or if that was 30 minutes across the entire metropolitan area.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, Commissioner Peichel, great question. The 30-minute travel shed was not limited to Washington County. It also extended into other counties, and it also extended across the river into Wisconsin. So the 30-minute travel shed was not limited only to Washington County.
Thank you. I was wondering if you could elaborate a little on what you mean by adaptive management plan.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, I'd be happy to take a first stab at that. And then, of course, we've got Washington County staff who could perhaps add to it. You know, we say a little bit in the business item about this, and that's where I'll draw a little bit of this response from, Mr. Chair. Typically, an adaptive management approach means an incremental process of testing techniques, observing their effectiveness, and then adjusting those techniques in response. The intent of adaptive management is to guide plant communities into more resilient conditions through a variety of approaches. For example, controlling invasive species that may negatively impact plant communities, restoring native plant communities by disturbance or supplemental seeding, and implementing forest management practices to make the forest stands in the special recreation feature more resilient. Does that help address your question, Mr. Chair?
I think so, yeah. So it's primarily about the natural resources components and basically just saying doing some stuff and seeing how it goes rather than having it all laid out all at once. Okay. Other questions?
This is Bob Moeller. Can we go over again just the criteria for a special recreation feature and why this is special? I understand it's got the clearest water in the community, but I just need to get a little help and recollection about the criteria as we consider this, please.
Mr. Chair, Commissioner Mueller, great question. You know, of course, the water quality and clarity, especially of Square Lake, is the primary feature here. In this special recreation feature, again, pointing to our business item or staff report for today's meeting, right up front, the second paragraph of our background section talks about special recreation features and how they often require unique managing or programming effort on the part of the Regional Park Implementing Agency. One of the other characteristics of special recreation features is that they also may not be that they may not meet that acreage threshold of a regional park. For example, Square Lake, as it currently exists, is 25 acres, and our minimum for most regional parks is at least 100 acres. So that's one of the other differences between a special recreation feature and regional parks. But yeah, those are largely the main differences between special recreation features and other units of our regional park system. Does that help, Commissioner Mueller?
Yes, it does. So currently, this Square Lake is what? Is a Washington County park, or is there no designation as a park?
Commissioner Mueller, it is. It's currently a special recreation feature within the regional park system. Washington County considers it a park. It's a maybe an easier term for people to get their minds around than special recreation feature, which I would suggest that maybe the public doesn't always understand. So the county does consider it a park, although of course in our designation in the Regional Parks Policy Plan, it is a special recreation feature.
Colin, I think to get at what Bob might be going for, am I correct in thinking we have already granted it the designation of a special recreation feature in our system plan, and we just did not have a master plan for the site available yet? Yeah.
Yes, Mr. Chair, I appreciate that clarification. That is exactly correct. Yes, this is the first master plan for Square Lake Special Recreation Feature.
Thank you, Chair. That was an oversight on my part that I was thinking we were wrestling with the designation. The Chair saying, no, that's not the case. It's just the master plan. Thank you very much.
Yeah, this is one of those awkward things where something's existed for a long time and they just haven't gotten funding for it before. So they haven't needed a master plan before. It's been around for a while. I have a question that may need to go to county staff. I know one of the things that's unique about the water and this lake is that it has the depth and temperature to support a two-tier fishery, meaning trout have been available in the lower depths and other warm water fish higher up. But there was some issues at least a few years ago where they weren't sure about the health of that fishery and impacts on the rest of the water quality. And so I know stocking has been suspended for a little while. And I was just wondering what the outcome of that has been, if there is an outcome yet, or what the current status is otherwise.
And Mr. Chair, of course, I would invite Connor Schaefer or Sandy Brewer or potentially Sharon Bryce to share their comments here if appropriate.
Thank you, Chair, for the question, and Colin for the presentation. An update on the trout fishing stocking was actually a frequent question that we got asked throughout this master plan. I would kind of preface my update by saying we really wanted to focus our master planning engagement on the park itself because the DNR manages the lake. The county, has a seat at that table, but at the end of the day, it is a DNR lake, and that was an effort that they were leading, is assessing the trout and the fishing involved on that lake. And the DNR was also involved in our master planning process, so that we kind of leaned on them to answer a lot of those questions. The several years when that was going on, they were having conversations with the community about trout stocking. It was suspended and it's continued. The suspension is continued. We are not. The DNR is not stocking the lake with trout right now. So if I think the DNR is kind of, I don't want to say like, kind of put not the issue to rest, but is backed off, maybe is the right word, for now, and is kind of in this pattern of, we're suspending it until further notice type of conversations. We do get comments on both sides every year, but we forward those to the DNR. So maybe, without being in the weeds too much, it's kind of a high level update on that. And I would welcome Sandy or Sharon, who have maybe other additional contents they'd like to add.
Okay, thanks, Connor. Yeah, I wasn't sure of the status of that and whether that impacted what kinds of things we were attempting to address in the plan, because I know there was also, in addition to the fish themselves, there was some sort of a water quality concern, but I don't know the details of it. So I think that answers what I was wondering. If staff want to add any more, you're certainly welcome to. Otherwise, I'm open for any other questions.
Chair Russo, this is Sandy Brewer, Parks Director, Washington County. Connor basically nailed it. Recently having discussions with our Natural Resource Coordinator, Dan McSwain, he alluded to exactly the same thing, that we are on hold, on pause with any additional trout stocking at this time.
Okay, thank you, Sandy. Other questions or motions from anyone?
I will move acceptance of the recommendation of staff.
I'll
Okay.
second that.
Second for that, thank you. So that motion is the extremely simple item from this, which is simply that the Metropolitan Council approve Washington County's Square Lake Special Recreation Feature Master Plan. Is there any further discussion on that motion?
Yeah, this is Cecily again. I actually live in the neighborhood. I'm about a 5-mile distance from there, and I go quite often. It really is a sweet place. I know that's probably not a good term for a park, but it's almost like it's suspended in time. People just hanging out at the beach or playing volleyball, paddleboarding on the lake, fishing or scuba diving. It really is, a wonderful gem, to have in this part of the county. And I applaud, the county staff for, preparing such a great master plan, and all of the public outreach that they did to the community and how they worked with the TAC. I really look forward to what happens in the next few years with acquisition for improvements. Thank you.
Yeah, I'll echo that the acquisition possibilities are interesting because one of the things that's always held this spot back a little bit is just that it's so limited in space. So it's been a nice park, but only had a couple of amenities available and things you could do there. So having a couple of extra options would be a great addition. I see a little hand raised thing for Linnea.
Trying to lean into the technology. I just a quick clarification question, because I think this will be meaningful when presentation comes before full council. On page 4 of the slide, this is where there's conversation around the engagement that happens and some learning from it. If I might have heard this incorrectly, but when I heard was that there were disparities by race, but it's not reflected on the slide. Did I mishear that?
Mr. Chair, Councilmember Alice Ingebretson, I believe I began this slide in talking about how the county conducted an examination of public engagement for stakeholders by race, ethnicity, national origin, income, ability, age, and other pertinent characteristics. The suite of characteristics that we talk about in relation to our equity analysis. But then in the next portion, I mentioned that the disparities in Washington County park visitation included age, income, education, and physical or mental ability. And that was something that we followed up with county staff on as well, just to clarify that this statement about disparities has to do with a comparison between Washington County residents and Washington County Park and Trail visitors. So when you look at Washington County Park and Trail visitors compared to the regional population, you would also see a disparity related to race and ethnicity as well.
I'm 100% sure it's something that'll come up. My recommendation is maybe to include that information in the slide. I think, we've talked about our work at the council to make sure that we're talking about race. So I would just say in general, when we're looking at equity analysis, providing that information, whatever it is something that you'll definitely want to just do on the standard. Thank you for that clarification.
I have no idea how we would measure this, especially before we get back updated census block information. But it might also be interesting to know how that compares within that 30-minute travel shed. Yes, Linnea.
I'll tell you, the thing that I keep thinking of is of street light. My guess is that this data was not using street light data. And so you're just using the data that was collected via the surveys. So I just think what a world of difference street light is going to make just in scale and scope and things like that. But I might be wrong.
Well, as a frequent user of this park, I'm there probably at least once a week in the warmer months. And yes, May Township is a very white community, but surprisingly, this park is far more diverse than you'd expect. There are often populations of, I'm going to call them 20-something Asian Americans playing volleyball. And people often joke, oh, where are the young people today? If they don't see them picnicking and playing volleyball. So, it is well known. And, again, I don't know where they're coming from, whether they're coming from further south in the county or closer to St. Paul. But it's kind of neat, that it's not just locals using that park.
Thank you. I have something posted here.
I was just gonna say, related to Cecily's comment, that they very well could be local, dependent based on the census data and the populations there. And I think that's exactly what I would say about Square Park. I was really surprised to hear the travel shed was 30 miles, and I just that was a bit of a shock for me. Is that an average, or is that what that number is reflecting? Because I would have expected it to be much bigger.
Yeah, go ahead, Colin. It looks like you wanted to clarify how that is established.
Yeah, Mr. Chair and council member, I was just taking a quick look at page 11 of the master plan, where we see the travel shed for Square Lake. And they show a variety of 10, 20, and 30-minute drives. So rather than a 30-mile travel shed, just to clarify, it was a 30-minute travel shed. And for the most part, that covers a good portion of Washington County, but also touches on areas to the north, to the west, to the east in Wisconsin a bit, and of course to the south. 30-minute, yes.
Thanks, Colin. I actually meant the 30-minute. I would have thought that would be larger. Square Lake's kind of famous, isn't it? Am I wrong?
Kind of, but people also don't like going very far. Monica.
Yeah, it's the first time that I hear of the lake, so I don't know. I mean, I have been in San Croix, but I haven't been on that lake. What I was gonna say is I just checked it out, and from Brooklyn Park is 45 minutes ride in a car, and I'm sure we're not counting, construction somewhere in Minnesota through 694 Tenney. So I can tell that to me it will be like a 2-hour ride if I'm lucky. But what concerned me when I was reading that is that the closest public transportation is 8 miles from the park. And I don't know if you want to go camping and, hiking, and on the way back also walk another 8 miles. That's a lot. I understand, public transportation in this state is not ideal. But I don't know if there will be a way to explore other options. Like, you don't really need a bus for everything or a subway. There is, like, now there are private transportation like Uber or Lyft. And if, like as a regional park, we could have a part of the budget for these ones to set up like some kind of family coupons for disadvantaged communities or something like that they could use so they can actually go to farther away, because I think the distance and transportation is one of the biggest problems with accessibility in regional parks, which I know you know, as I see Jeremy's laughing at me on this one.
I was more laughing at the comment from Cecily about public transportation just being non-existent in most of Washington County.
Yeah, and even where I live, which is much further in than Cecily, we don't have public transportation available here either. And I remember several years ago, there was some sort of an open house being held in Hugo about extension of some public transit bus line stuff, I think, but it also impacting a trail. So trails and buses together because they're going through the same kind of corridor. And when I went to go do a Google Maps thing for it, I put in the drive for it from my house was like 12 minutes or something. But if I wanted to get there by public transit, it would have taken like 2 days because there were some things that only run once a day. So yeah, that's definitely a big problem out here. But I can tell you, slightly more promising is, I don't know if it's called out in this presentation about the park plan, but there are some plans in the works that we have not seen master plans for yet, I don't think, for possibly connecting this park better to some surrounding areas by trails. And some of those areas are more public transit accessible, some are not, but at least that would somewhat extend how you could get there. Including, eventually there would be a possibility to go from St. Paul to that park all on bike trail, but we have some significant gaps to work out still. So that's kind of where things stand in Washington County. Public transit is usually a pipe dream, except in the really densely populated bits along the I-94 corridor.
Well, I don't know if you know, Brooklyn Park is still trying to figure out the blue line for the rail trail that is coming, is not coming, is keeping not coming. So I know it's a problem, but thanks for answering that one.
Chair, this is Connor. Could
Yeah.
I address a earlier comment before we could, then I'm happy to
Sure.
answer other ones. Councilmember Atlas Ingebrigtsen mentioned the streetlight data, and I just want to call out a collaboration that we had with the Met Council on streetlight data that we piloted with the master plan engagement with this. I worked with Met Council staff member Liz Roten, who is kind of the leading the streetlight park and trail visitation effort from the Met Council staff, and she's also a very frequent Square Lake Park user with her kayak. So she served on the TAC and provided us with this awesome interactive website that showed streetlight data for this park, and then we used it not only planning engagement but also looking at use and circulation within the park, which is something that you can do with streetlight data. And there are there's a presentation in the appendices of the master plan that Liz gave our TAC and provided some background on some of the key findings from streetlight data. If you are interested, and if Colin or if Met Council staff wanted to include that in another staff report or something like that, I could direct you. I would like to direct you there too, because Liz was really helpful in the project, not only from a data perspective, but also was a just as a park user, because she goes to that park a lot as well. So wanted to appreciate Met Council's collaboration on being able to bring in some of that streetlight data into master planning.
Thank you, Connor. For those who couldn't see it, we had little clapping and thumbs up emojis from Linnea. I didn't even know it was a thing. We have something from Anthony Taylor. Go ahead.
I don't want to waste everybody's time, but I just wanted to say that unfortunately, Monica, sometimes people move to Washington County because there's no mass transit. So that's beside the point. But sorry, Tony. The thing about accessibility, actually Square Lake is really cool, but the gateway gets so close right now, right? Like you just turn on the rail or something. Wasn't one of the plans that Washington County shared with us a while ago around the extensions related to the bike system, the trail system that was coming? I don't remember when it was, but I think Square Lake is actually a great destination for the recreational cyclists, for people that are kind of making an adventure. So that's one thing I did want to say. And I don't remember it exactly, and maybe someone else does. But the other question I had was, as far as it being a special recreation feature and the addition of, for example, kayaking rental, is there any sense of adding programmatic elements to this as a special recreation feature? Because it is, 15 miles from Eastside St. Paul? I mean, at that distance threshold, I think, do you have a distance that equates to, so we can kind of think about it? Because I feel like it's about 15 miles, right? Thanks, Colin.
You're welcome, Mr. Chair. Commissioner Taylor, just to address your first question, yes, there is a regional trail search corridor between Pine Point Regional Park and Square Lake Special Recreation Feature. This is also mentioned in the staff report on page 14. It's about 4.3 miles between the two spaces. There is not a master plan for that regional trail search corridor yet. But of course, the Gateway State Trail, which connects Pine Point Regional Park and St. Paul, is a great link, into St. Paul, and there's other connections to be made there, of course. As for the potential for programming, the master plan does reference the potential for programming with the rental opportunities that could be made available with the provision of non-motorized watercraft launch opportunities. But again, we've got some great resources on the line here, and I'll welcome Connor Schaefer or Sandy Brewer or Sharon Price to offer their insights as well.
Thanks, Colin, and thank you for the question, Commissioner Taylor. You really hit it on the head. Well, first of all, Colin addressed that regional search corridor connection into the gateway. We were really excited about that, and that was part of last year's system addition process. So we appreciate this committee's support on adding that to the system because we think that's a really important connection. On the programming side of the thing, side of it, we did hear a lot of requests throughout our master planning process about other programming opportunities. We do have quite a bit quite popular programming there today. It's some stand-up paddle boarding that we've done there has been really pretty popular. And we've also seen kayaks and stand-up paddle boards just explode in the last year especially just with people wanting to get outdoors. You know, you could go to an outdoor store and they were out of stock for months. And Square Lake is a perfect lake to try a lot of that out, which makes it a really cool opportunity to introduce people who want kind of a smaller lake that is very pretty and scenic. It's very natural setting around the lake. So it makes it for a really it's an awesome way to try out your kayak and paddle boards. So building off of this master plan, we did apply for the equity grant program to bring in rental equipment for stand-up paddle boards and kayaks to bring that to this park because we just heard such good support from the community through the master planning process. Now we're looking for funding and we're hoping to get it through the equity grant program. That was one of the proposals we submitted. So appreciate that comment, Commissioner Taylor, because it is absolutely something we heard from the community.
Thanks for that. And I think to Monica's point as well is, as part of that, because I do think that the potential outreach to especially East Side St. Paul, I mean, it's a really close link there. As part of that programming, is there already in that master plan something specifically about connections to the community to the west? And actually around, I was thinking about an effort where you immediately call out the ability to make some type of I'm saying coupon certificate, something that allows someone to so price is never an obstacle. You know what I mean? And is that something that you can bake into that rental system as you all build it and make that part of an ongoing outreach effort? Because I do think I just think that's a really good opportunity because Square Lake is super friendly. You're absolutely right about it. And it actually is very close once you make the trip. Until you go there, though, it's invisible. But I think for that community, especially, we see East Side, even Maplewood, part of, and then you got Oak Park Heights, that area down there, I think is really pretty diverse demographically as well. So Square Lake becomes a great entry point for them into the rest of the system, even because I think Lake Elmo kind of stills all the air. You know what I mean?
Commissioner, I appreciate that comment. There's definitely opportunities to increase kind of our marketing efforts to make people more aware of this park, especially people in the East Metro and some of those populations that you mentioned. So that's absolutely something we'll be looking at going forward. Because we found families that once you get to Square Lake, they want to come back and they want to spend all day. Maybe it is a 20 or 40-minute drive for them, but with the amenities we have at that park, some people stay. And we found that in the streetlight data. Some people are there for 4 hours. They bring their lunch because we've got a really large picnic area. They'll paddleboard a little bit. They'll swim a little bit. They'll play volleyball for a little bit. There's just a lot. You can make a full day out of it. So there are definitely some good opportunities to take advantage of.
Do you have data like that shows residence time as well? Once someone has come to the park, do you have data that shows? Because I thought that is an interesting, piece of data.
Yeah, once again, I'll shout out Liz with the Met Council who helped us look at the streetlight data. It's an interactive map I'm looking at right now that she provided for us that helped measure people's stay at regional parks. There's some limits to that data as I understand it, but it's definitely something that Council is looking at. Piloting, trying to get that data to regional park implementation agencies to see if that data is helpful in their master planning or in their programming or in however they're using it, if they want to use it.
Okay. Is there any other discussion on this motion? Okay, it sounds like we are ready to proceed with a vote. Again, that motion was just for the proposed action to approve this master plan. So I'll hand this back over to Michelle to do our vote.
Thank you, Chair Russo. I'll start with Asada Brown,
Aye.
Monica Dillenberg,
Aye.
Cicely Harris,
Aye.
Bob Moeller,
Aye.
Jeremy Peichel,
Aye.
Anthony Taylor, Kena Ye,
Aye.
Tony Russo.
Aye.
Thank you.
It sounds like that carries. So that will move us then on to our information item, which is the Regional Parks System Historical Cultural Study. They're starting. We have Tracey Kinney presenting about this.
Hello, team. It's actually a team of us presenting tonight, Tony.
Okay.
So I'm going to kick us off. First of all, I hear my small children yelling downstairs, so if you too hear that, I'm going to apologize ahead of time. So good evening, council members, chair, commissioners. We're here tonight to talk about the historical cultural study. And I want to introduce our team. It's Tracey Kinney, Jessica Lee, Sarah Gong, and soon we'll also be including an intern who will start in June as well. And we can't wait to introduce them to you as well. The overall purpose of this study is to help everyone to continue working towards our imagined future of welcoming an inclusive regional park system. We know that history matters and that it shapes today. Next slide, please. So we're starting off by showing you a project that was part of the Art Shanty project when we had our shanty out on the frozen lake, getting love letters. We also did a half-day workshop working with 5 different BIPOC artists, asking them what would a welcoming sign be to the parks? What would they like to see at regional parks if they could create anything when they showed up? And so we created these 5 different flags, working with 5 different artists. So the artist on the left, Marilena Miles, is a self-taught Native American artist located in St. Paul. She gained her recognition for being one of the first Dakota women creating digital art, including fabric patterns, animations, illustrations, bringing modernity to Indigenous history, languages, and oral traditions. Her flag is about the colors are the diversity of our city coming together as inner hoops through the movement of Indigenous whirling log geometry, which represents humanity and healing. The center morning star and the floral designs are the knowledge and growth we gain through rebuilding positive relationships and connections with nature. The flag on the right is by Whit Sayasoko. Whit has been actively engaged in the intersection of arts and civic process through a variety of roles as an artist, graphic designer, and arts educator. Previously, he was selected as Intermedia Arts and City of Minneapolis Artists for Creative City Making, a year-long collaboration between the artists and city planners to develop innovative approaches for addressing long-term transportation, land use, economic, environmental, and social issues facing Minneapolis. His flag is about, he states, as a person of color, I don't see many advertisements speaking directly to non-white audiences. So when designing this flag, I wanted to make sure that people of color were figuratively and literally at the center of the image. One of my favorite things to do at a regional park is simply hang in a hammock with my family. I find this to be a universal activity and one that would speak to many others. In terms of design, I tried to keep the colors bold and the images simple so that the viewer could easily recognize the scene from far away. As a team, we're excited to see where the historical and cultural study takes us and what form it takes on. I'm now going to pass the presentation on to Tracey.
Thanks, Amanda. Good afternoon, everyone. Chair, commissioners, council member. As you know, my name is Tracey Kinney. I'm a senior planner in Parks and Community Development. And Greg, could you advance the slide, please? So where did this come from? Well, we've been listening to you. Before you are a couple of moments in time that have had very large impact on us. So but most recently, we heard from the public, and specifically through the public engagement of the amendment for the policy plan amendment that happened in just recently in December. But particularly through the engagement pilot through Urban Roots and Cycle Sisters. And you see before you one of their quotes, specifically talking about history and why history is so meaningful. We also heard from our agencies and from you, our policymakers, through the equity analysis requirement, both through the development and the implementation, that history is very important. And so what we have for you today is a little bit of context, both from advice from the public, and then also advice from you, our policymakers and our agencies, that history is important. It's the next step in our equity journey. Essentially, it's a deepening of our conversation, and it's a continuation of our work. And it's our joint journey of realizing this imagined new future that we're looking for. So history and culture provide the context that shape the present moment, people's lived experiences, and the regional park system today. It's the contextual detail that is so needed to serve our region's residents in a holistically place-based way. Not everyone feels welcomed nor valued. Imagine if this project could continue our equity efforts through joint learning, building and continuing relationships with our regional organizations, and move the ball forward through meaningful and attainable ways. Next slide, please. So a little context for you. We are in the first conversation with you, our policymakers, about this brand new study that entered the policy plan during the amendment process just recently in 2020 of December. And here before you is Chapter 9, and this is one of the work tasks, this historical cultural study. And this is what the policy plan says, that the council will conduct a historical cultural study to describe and document the impacts that inequitable policies have had on the development of the regional park system, and to explore the development of a land acknowledgement that recognizes and respects Indigenous residents and the histories of the land where our regional parks and trails are located. And I wanted to also add the equity analysis requirement that of course is in the policy plan as well, that Colin talked about in depth today, but also this is one of the questions that we have the agencies answer during the master plan process. This is 1B under data, I think it's the data collection, and it's what is known about future stakeholders, underserved populations, and how the region's history created present day inequitable outcomes. So just to start the conversation off, I just wanted to note that as I had mentioned before, this is a mutual learning experience. And we've learned a lot about land acknowledgement since December of 2020. It doesn't seem like long ago, but we as staff are engaged in the tribal state relations training and have learned a lot about land acknowledgements and how serious they are to our tribal nations and our Indigenous communities. I also wanted to note that in April of 2019, the Governor Walz issued an executive order 1924 that required all of the state agencies to have a government-to-government tribal relations policy. The council did that. We have a government-to-government relations policy. We implemented that, approved it by council in July of 2019. And what that does is establishes policy and a contact at the council to have a formal consultation process with our tribal nations in the region, in the state of Minnesota. And so throughout this process, our intent with land acknowledgement mainly is to, one, to acknowledge and recognize and adhere to our own council's policy and respectfully work collaboratively with our tribal liaison, and then to ensure that our conversation with our agencies and throughout this project is respectful and meaningful to all parties involved. So at this time, what we are going to be focusing on is building and extending relationships with our tribal nations and indigenous communities. And so this may not be part of this immediate project, but hopefully down the line, we'll find something that's far more meaningful, and it might be named something completely different. So right now, I just kind of wanted to pause for any questions.
Okay, do any commissioners have questions at this point? Okay, it sounds like you can continue if you'd like, Tracey.
Sounds great, sounds great. Greg, can you advance the slide, please? Fantastic. So what could this look like? So just to kind of remind you again, this is a brand new study. It's a project. It's actually a super long-term project. And I'll talk about the timeline in a second. But what we hope is that this is a continuation, or it is deepening our hope for this dream of an equitable, welcoming regional park system. But what this could be here is a continuation of our collective work that we're doing with equity in all of our equity programs. That it's more about process than product. So it's really about this engagement process, both with our policymakers, us internally with staff, and then us working with our agencies and our agency staff, and then also with our regions organizations. And then mutual learning and building relationships, which I just provided you an example on in relation to land acknowledgement. And then outcomes that are meaningful, useful, and attainable. So I just want to talk about this a little bit. Wow, man, a historical cultural study, that could be anything under the sun. But I just wanted to acknowledge that we can only work at the speed of trust, and we only want to work through outcomes that are meaningful. So that means that this is just a step in our journey. This is a bite-sized chunk, and we need to. This project is going to be in a form that is going to just continue the ball forward and move us forward. It's not going to be the whole thing. I mean, it's a vessel, it's a vehicle to continue the conversation forward. Next slide, please. So what does this mean? What could this be? Well, for one, it could potentially be a lifting up of stories. So a lifting up of possible current day inequitable stories that then peel back layers of history. It could be place-based inquiry that has a origin with the National Park Service and the state historic preservation state, yep, I'm blanking on the component of the State Historic Office, Preservation Office. They have a template that they utilize that includes a lot of engagement and a lot of study and research. Or it could be completely something else. I mean, what if it was a celebration of culture and history through a living website, similar to what New York City just recently did? It could be truly anything under the sun at this point, or a combination of many of these things. We are excited to engage you, our policymakers, and our agencies through a process where we're can start with the agencies on a potential gap analysis, or see what's missing, and where should we go from there. So next slide, please. So I hinted at this before, but this is a long-term project. This year is going to primarily be about scoping this study. So right now we are embarking on this continue imagining and deepening phase. We're starting the conversation with you about developing a vision, mission, impact, and outcome statement for the overall project that we can continue to come back to guide our way. Next, we're going to go into this assess and co-creation phase that is going to develop a scoping document and a public engagement plan. The public engagement plan is going to include both the council's relationships and the agency's relationships, so we could figure out where to make the right first step and what is missing. We are then going to move into the continue our journey phase, and all of this work is going to culminate in material so that we can hire consultants, so that then we'll be able to they can be able to guide us through this process and out to the other side to a product and with impacts that are attainable and meaningful and doable for everyone. And then before you, here's everyone who's at the table. We have the parks implementing agencies, you, our council policymakers, our regional organizations, which essentially are very similar to our public, our amendments, public pilot engagement, our recreational focused, and youth serving organizations, and potentially more than that. We'll see. And then also agency staff technical, we have an agency staff technical committee and a council staff technical committee that is feeding into all of our guiding, directing staff, essentially. So next slide, please. So now I'm going to hand the torch over to Jessica, and she is going to walk us through the next few slides.
Thanks. Hi, everyone. For the record, I'm Jessica Lee, Senior Parks Planner. Can everyone hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Thank you. All right, so as Tracey mentioned, we have met with the agency partners and our internal staff technical team to begin brainstorming and discussing what we want this project to be. One of our focus conversation topics has been around our vision statement, or where we want to go, what we want to aspire to. How do we answer the question, what does an equitable regional park system look like? One example of a vision statement could be to prioritize the region's underserved population's sense of belonging by centering their culture and history. We'll be asking you for your thoughts and ideas on this in a few minutes. Next slide, please. We've also been exploring the mission statement. How will we achieve the vision? What is our core purpose, our present situation, and the cause of the situation? How might we achieve an equitable regional park system? Perhaps by lifting up cultural, historical, and systemic narratives, or by supporting actions towards a more equitable system. Next slide, please. Next, we have our impacts. What long-term effects are we striving for? Maybe mutual learning, collaboration, relationship building, sustainable support for marginalized communities, possibly culminating in historical, cultural, and systemic stories that are alive in the planning, design, and programming of our parks and trails. Next slide, please. And finally, we have the outcomes. What are the deliverables we could produce from this project? Some ideas are tools to help agencies address the equity analysis requirement, accountability indicators, an accurate history narrative, and awareness of sacred and historical sites. Tonight, we are asking for your thoughts and ideas around what do you want this project to be? How can we achieve it? What are the long-term effects we should strive for? And what deliverables can we produce? After the conversation tonight, we hope to have a better understanding of our vision, mission, impacts, and outcomes. But before we jump into that discussion, Tracey will briefly cover the next steps. Next slide, please.
Thanks, Jessica. Yep, so I just wanted to go back to that timeline and just mention to you that we're still in that visioning part of the timeline, and we will be coming back to you. When will we be coming back? Let's go to the next slide. So here we are in that imagining phase, beginning phase, and we're going to be doing lots and lots of meetings with the agencies and the partners, and then we're going to be going into the creating phase, looking at that scoping document. We're excited to have our new intern on board, and you will meet them as soon as they are ready to come before you. But currently we have a meeting scheduled for November. So you will see us back again in November to talk about the draft scoping document. And with that, that's our presentation for tonight, and we look forward to your comments and the conversation. And of course, this was done slightly later, so that's why my name is the only one there.
Were there any like specific question prompts you wanted from us at this stage, or just any kind of general questions?
Chair, commissioners, council members, overall, we would love to have your overall reflections, and if you have any comments related to that mission, vision, mission, impact, and outcome for the project, that would be wonderful.
Okay. So, commissioners, any broad input on those things?
This is Jeremy. I've got a couple thoughts, maybe.
Go ahead.
I'm really grateful for the presentation and the depth of your, or I guess the breadth of your thinking on this, because you've got it wide open at this point. And I'm imagining a very creative, interpretive project where we could have art or an oral history type podcast or something emerge that can tell these stories, and the fact that this history is continuing to be written today, not just that these policies existed in the before times and now we don't see inequity in policy at all. So I think there's an interesting opportunity to connect the decisions of the past to the consequences of today and the ways that we're trying to change or improve the circumstance for the future. And I would love to see some of that worked into this as a story, but that's just me, obviously. I know I'm one of many policymakers that are affiliated, but those are my thoughts, at least right now, and I'll look forward to that other informal session to learn more.
Thank you, Jeremy. Anyone else? I will say, going off of what Jeremy said, I know we had some comments from Washington County about in their master planning process, recognizing how some past decisions influence the current state. And this would be an interesting opportunity to look at that across the board and also figure out from those how can we avoid making similar mistakes in our decision making going forward so we have a better position, 50, 100 years from now, not only on just trying to correct those existing issues, but how do we prevent any new ones? And then a completely different subject, I know also you talked about land acknowledgement, and that's certainly an interesting thing. It gets kind of complicated because there's some places where maybe multiple groups had claims over land and overlapping ones, things going back and forth in different time frames. But also, that is one of those things where you can run into a situation of treating indigenous peoples as a thing of the past. So in addition to recognizing who are the historical people of this land, anytime we can connect to the present as well would be useful. Like there may be something that is a park now, but surrounding land may still be used as hunting and gathering space, even if it's used in other ways because of the ways treaties were written. Or if there's things within the park that are still important to certain people. Just anything that recognizes that these indigenous groups still exist. They're not just a historical concept.
Tracey, thank you for bringing this to our attention. I want to call your attention to something you may have seen on Channel 2 last month. It was a film by Rita Davern and a woman named Ramona Stately, an Indian woman, entitled Stories I Didn't Know. And it was about the Davern family who came and bought land along the Mississippi River in what is now Fort Snelling Regional Park. And what she began to experience was that this was land that was once Indian land. And she was talking about respecting the fact that that land really didn't belong to her parents. And she was wondering about ways of making reparations and perhaps even seeing if there were some ways for this to go back to the initial indigenous tribes. So the film is wonderful. It was on Channel 2, Stories I Didn't Know, and it fits perfectly into what you're exploring. So I would recommend it.
Thanks so much, Commissioner Muller. I have watched it. I thought it was fantastic, and I also thought it was a really good entryway into the conversation. So I would encourage anyone to watch that.
Any other commissioners have feedback?
Yeah, this is Monica Dillenburg or sorry, Linnea. Who goes first? I just saw your hand.
The chair called for commissioners, and I like to have the commissioners speak before I do, so I'm fine with waiting.
All right, sorry. I will keep an eye on the stuff now more. Now, I was gonna say, I love the idea to incorporate history and culture coming from a country whose history is way older than here. Like, just an example, the house where I grew up was built in the 16th century, and it was totally normal. I took the subway, and as I was walking through the colonial part of Mexico City, you can see on the other side the ruins of the Aztecas. So I think what would be nice is just do something like that, like incorporate both and accept both together. Because as Jeremy was saying, it's nice to know about the past, but we need to know what is going on. Take it all together and create a culture from now to the future. It's a problem when we try to delete history or rewrite history, which I see sometimes, especially schools get all the stuff wrong sometimes, sadly. But I do like the idea that if it's, through art is a great way to give an idea to everybody how we were and where are we now. I do like both of the flags they represent, and you can tell right away that there are totally different cultures but going to the same concept. So that is good, and I'm really excited for it. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, Linnea?
I want to make sure there's no other commissioners that want to chat
Okay.
first.
Any other commissioners who have thoughts before we go to Linnea? I think you're good to go.
All right. I just, one of the things that I want to just really appreciate, Chair, you sharing is that aspect, and others people speaking to it, I think is really important about acknowledging that in land acknowledgements, not just talking about things in a historical context, but talking about them in the present context. And I want to also talk about being clear about action as a part of a land acknowledgement, that it's not just enough to say, we're on your land, sorry about that, or I'm not sure what, but to say the so what part of it. And one of the things that I think is something we can do is talk about how land acknowledgement and that Native communities have rights in regional park spaces and state park spaces, and to be clear about it in the context of our business, in the context of what we do. And I love all the other comments that were made, but I really want to make sure that we that one was an awareness for me. We've had it come up operationally in our work in the past, and I've been participating in the tribal relations cohort training along with many people on the team. And we just learned this like a month ago, and I was like I was a little frustrated, not at our team, but that one of our agencies was like, I don't know if we're gonna we don't know if we're gonna charge them for doing ceremonies in their birth location or not. What we know right now is that's against the law to charge them. So like, let's also like make it really functional, and so that anyone who happens to read it knows the rights of Native populations in our regional, state park, whatever the scope of those rights are, if it's public parks. And then I talked with the team a little bit before. I think it's so important to talk about truth and reconciliation and disclosure. And we have a lot of spaces that are valuable locations historically that are unmarked or decimated. And we can do better in our regional parks. So mapping those out, being truthful about them, transparent, and are some of the actions that I really like to see. And it's for us, it's for this group to decide the scale and the scope of what this work is. It doesn't have to be limited to what's on paper right now. So this is the opportunity to say that. And then I really hope that I think Anthony has a comment, and I as I've reflected on this quite a bit, Anthony has run for many years a wonderful historical bike tour overnight, and there's a lot of great history. So I think about what's that knowledge and how do we incorporate all the great different things that touch our facilities and our grounds and our lands. I think of everything from Dred Scott to other parts of emancipation to George Bonga, all of these different people that we can be, whose legacy we've benefited from, but we never say their name or teach their name, if that makes sense. Thanks.
Thank you, Linnea. And as she alluded to, Anthony Taylor thought of something partway through that. So go ahead, Anthony.
Thanks. No, I just couldn't make the technology work. It was just me fumbling on the phone. But I think, I think the thing that I would say is I really think that one of the areas where we have to push very, really push strong attention to is in the interpretive experiences that we have in our spaces. That's one of the ones that I think is really important. I'm always concerned about land acknowledgements right now because it feels like absolution that is undeserved, in a weird way. And I think that Linnea's point about action is really important. Um, and I think that that's why I think the work that we have to do is really around the interpretive um, landmarks. It is about an honest um, telling of history, and not just and I think it actually and I appreciate Jeremy's comments and people's comments that I think that the work is to connect it through today because I think there's a level of acknowledgement that has to happen related to the communities that got here 100 years ago, 50 years ago. There's an actual way that in terms of our policy has wielded itself disproportionately against people that 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 really again just got here. So I think there's something we can probably do in our system, especially a regional park system versus a national park system, versus city parks. I mean, there's a lot to do simply around the land is one set of policies and acknowledgement there. And there's another set of acknowledgements that I think we can bring to life through our interpretive work, through the landmarks, through even in terms of our programming, where we do some storytelling that does connect to the actual lived experience of many different peoples in terms of how we got here. Because otherwise, we really, like right now, like I said, land acknowledgements are the minimum flavor of the day that everybody's going to do. And I think that there's something stronger for us to state there. And then I think the last thing is that we engage in active um, engagement with those communities that are still regionally and geographically connected to the spaces that we own. And it's a very tough thing because we're acknowledging it, but we all know we're not giving it back. And so it's a strange thing for me in terms of how we pursue it. And so I really appreciate Linnea's points about we have to bring these into actions. And one of the pieces is even recommending that um, communities that come to our spaces, the schools that we work with. I mean, there's a lot of programming that we do that are connected to large groups of young people and families, and I just think there's something around acknowledgement. Um, Not of the land. And I think that's part of it for me, that is acknowledgement of the people. Like there's something that just feels like I'm really stuck on semantics, but I think it really is not a land acknowledgement. And so anyway, I'll end with that. But I think that we are in a good place and I think we can add value in pushing on this point in terms of how the regional park system will embrace this idea. So thanks.
All right. Thank you, Anthony. And thank you also to Amanda and Tracy and Jessica for your presentation. I'm sure also, if people stew on this for a little while and think of other thoughts, you can certainly email them to staff later as well, I'm sure. Okay. I think with that, we'll move on to our reports, if everyone's good with that.
Thank you.
In terms of my reports, I'll just say, Jeremy mentioned people have been working on the equity grant proposal reviews. That'll be moving on to its next stage shortly. And I'm sure we'll hear about those in a little bit. Otherwise, I think that's all I had. Are there other commissioner reports?
I have something brief.
Yes, Jeremy.
So I was just notified a couple weeks ago that I was appointed to the Legislative Citizen Commission on Minnesota Resources by the governor as a citizen appointee. So I'll be serving there as well for the next 4 years. Very excited about the opportunity there and the way to exercise my degree in conservation for the benefit of the whole state rather than just the metro area.
All right, thank you. Yes, we wanted to congratulate you on that for sure. That's a big deal. Any other commissioners? Linnea, anything from you?
Yeah, just maybe to wrap up, service for me on the the state's outdoor recreation task force. And so check out the final recommendations from there. Anticipate there'll be more work to happen and come out of that work. But that information is available now, and maybe we could share that, Emmett, at some point in time. Just as a follow-up, as a part of those conversations, and I think we talked about this at one of our meetings recently, you know, the work of the Met Council around advancing equity is really one of a kind in MPOSC space nationally. And we've talked about how we could highlight that a little bit more. And I just want to make sure we don't lose that idea of doing a story and talking about the things we're working with. I by no means am saying what we do is perfect, but we certainly have programs and vested resources and some practices in place that are not happening in other places. And I think it's important to share what we're doing and to celebrate it too. So I just want to make sure we don't forget about that, that we keep that in mind, and we take advantage of that and the great work that all of you have been doing as commissioners. So that's all I got for today. Thank you.
Thank you, Renee. Any?
Tony, did you ask for staff reports?
Yes. Do you have anything for us, Emmett?
As a matter of fact, I do. I will make it very brief. First of all, so I have 4 quick ones. The legislature is entering the final 11 days of the session until they call a special session. We'll see. But I just wanted to let you know that the Parks and Trails legacy funding is going forward pretty much as the governor has requested, with 40% of the funding going to the Minnesota DNR, 40% going to the Metropolitan Council for distribution to the 10 agencies, and then 20% going to the Greater Minnesota Regional Parks and Trails Commission. So that's really good. There's another conference, so that was the Legacy Conference Committee. The Environment and Natural Resources Conference Committee is a little bit hung up. They were in the paper yesterday about how these California car emission standards are sort of stopping the negotiation process. It's continuing. They're working it out, so keep your fingers crossed. But we do have our operation and maintenance funding in that bill, as well as, and Jeremy, it's not a conflict of interest, so vote yes. The 2 LCCMR bills, the Legislative Citizen Commission on Minnesota Resources bills, are acquisition funding. So we have 2.25 million in the 2021 bill, and then the 2020 bill, which was hung up year before, we have $1 million. So keep your fingers crossed, because we don't have any acquisition funding right now. This is a bonding. This is not a bonding year. It's not a bonding year, but there's a bonding bill under consideration. It's in the House. I don't know that it's going to get out. The governor doesn't have a recommendation, but the park agencies do have a bill, and that's currently being considered at a $7.5 million level. So that's the legislative update. Keep your fingers crossed. I wanted to call out that we will be having an opportunity for commissioners to go on a Bedote tour. And Bob, this is the same person that was in the Channel 2 production you talked about. And I don't know her name. I think it's Ramona, but she is going to help lead this tour. It's going to begin at Fort Snelling State Park, and I'm really excited about it. You'll learn more. Amanda will get that on your calendars. I think it is proposed for Friday, September 17th, and it will go from 8:30 in the morning to 2:30 in the afternoon. So it's a commitment, but we hope that you can attend.
Well, that's really exciting. Yes, the woman, the Indigenous woman's name is Ramona, and the Irish woman's name is Rita Davern.
That's great. So we're going to come and we're going to learn from I know at least Ramona. So I wanted to also just remind people and thank people who have signed up for the deeper briefing of the historical cultural study. And one thing I promise is that we will, we'll make a lot of space for your questions and your advice. But a number of you have signed up. I sent out an opportunity. There's 4 times available if any of you would like to join those briefings. And you may be joined with Community Development Committee members too, of which our council member Atlas Ingebretson is one. So that's in your email. If you need any reminders or you need me to resend it, just shoot me a quick email. My final thing, I just wanted to tell you, the June 3rd MPOSC meeting agenda is already shaping it up well. No pressure, Tony, but one of the things we hope will be on the agenda will be the Equity Grant Program recommendations. I know that there's a lot of work going on right now with that. And then we have a hopeful acquisition coming forward from Three Rivers Park District. So we're going to do an equity nudge because Linnea has nudged me and us. So we will keep that alive. And that's all I have. So thank you.
All right. Thank you, Emmett. And with that, we are ready to adjourn. Thank you, everybody.
Tony, before we do, I'm sorry. This
Yes,
is
Bob.
Bob again. Emma just reminded me that summer is coming and our lockdown is over. And so I would be amiss not to recommend that we do some touring of the parks and hold our meetings over the summer, at least some of them, in our regional parks.
Sure. Yeah, we'll follow up on that with Emmett and see what's possible.
If you have ideas of specific places you want to visit, we do need to follow the governor's recommendation. So Bob, he hasn't called it yet. However, keep your fingers crossed and thank you for that gentle reminder, Bob. I think you're right. We need to get out into the parks to remind ourselves why we're here.
And we should probably do at least one of them, Emmett, where there is more diversity, a more diverse park, as well as some of the more rural parks.
If you have ideas, Bob, I'm wide open. But thank you. Love it.
Okay, we'll keep that in mind. All right, now we can adjourn and think about that as we go forward. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, everyone.